Hello. Before we begin, I need to make something absolutely clear. Everything I'm about to share with you today is general information only. It is not personal financial advice. Everyone's financial situation is different. Everyone's superannuation is different. Before making any decisions about your super, you must speak with a licensed financial advisor who understands your particular circumstances. You should also speak with your accountant about tax implications. Right, now that we've covered that, let's begin. $100,000. That's what we're talking about today. $100,000 added to your superannuation balance without working an extra hour, without taking on a second job, without sacrificing your lifestyle. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that sounds too good to be true. You're thinking there must be a catch. You're thinking this is probably for wealthy people, not for me. Let me stop you right there. This is real, this is legal, and this is available to everyday Australians. But here's what nobody tells you. It requires knowledge, it requires planning, and it requires you to take action before it's too late. Most people reach retirement and realize they could have had $50,000 or $70,000 or $100,000 more in their super if only they'd known what to do, if only someone had explained it to them. Well, today, I'm explaining it to you. I understand the fear you're feeling right now. You're looking at your super balance and you're doing the calculations. You're wondering if it's enough. You're wondering how long it will last. You're lying awake at 3 in the morning thinking about inflation, about medical costs, about whether you'll be a burden on your kids. I know that fear. I've seen it in hundreds of faces over the years, and I want you to know something. That fear is valid. The cost of living is rising faster than super balances for most people. The age pension, while helpful, isn't generous, and the rules around superannuation are complicated, deliberately complicated, some might say. But here's the truth. You have more control than you think. You have more options than you realize. And today, we're going to explore those options together. Let me ask you something. When you started working, did anyone sit you down and explain superannuation to you? Did anyone teach you about contribution strategies, or salary sacrifice, or government co-contributions? Probably not. For most of us, super was just this mysterious thing that happened in the background. Money came out of our pay, it went into an account somewhere, and we assumed it would all work out in the end. We trusted the system. We trusted that if we worked hard and did the right thing, we'd be looked after. But the system has changed, and many of us are realizing far too late that we should have been paying more attention all along. Let me take you back. Let me give you some context. Compulsory superannuation started in Australia in 1992. That's only about 30 years ago. Before that, most Australians relied entirely on the age pension when they retired. Some people had savings, some people had defined benefit pensions from their employers, but most people just had the pension. And you know what? Back then, that was enough. The age pension was designed to provide a basic but livable standard of living. Housing was affordable, healthcare was cheap, life was simpler. But over the last 30 years, everything has changed. Housing costs have exploded. The cost of healthcare, even with Medicare, keeps rising. Insurance, utilities, food, fuel, everything costs more. And the age pension hasn't kept pace, not even close. So, the government introduced compulsory superannuation. The idea was simple. Instead of relying entirely on the pension, Australians would save for their own retirement. Employers would contribute a percentage of wages into a super fund. That money would grow over time through investment returns and compound interest, and by the time you retired, you'd have a comfortable nest egg. That was the promise. But here's what they didn't tell you. The system was designed for people who would have 40 years of compulsory super contributions, people who started working in the 1990s and who would retire in the 2030s. But what about people who were already in their 30s or 40s when super became compulsory? What about people who took time off work to raise children? What about people who worked part-time or casually? Those people, many of you listening right now, have much lower super balances through no fault of your own. You didn't do anything wrong. The system just wasn't designed for you. And here's the other thing they didn't tell you. The employer contribution rate has increased over time, but slowly. It started at 3%, then it went to 9%. Now it sits at 11%, and it's scheduled to increase to 12%. But for much of your working life, it was less than that, which means your super balance is lower than it would be for someone starting work today. Again, not your fault. You can't change the past, but you can change the future, and that's what we're here to talk about. So how do you add $100,000 to your super without working more? Let me be very clear. This isn't about gambling on risky investments. This isn't about cryptocurrency or speculative stocks. This is about using legitimate strategies that the government has built into the superannuation system. Strategies that are designed to help you boost your super. Strategies that many people simply don't know about. There are several ways to do this, and we're going to go through each one carefully. Some will suit your situation, some won't. Some you can do right now. Some require planning. But by the end of today, you'll understand all of your options, and you'll be able to make informed decisions. Let's start with the most straightforward strategy, voluntary contributions. Now, I know what you're thinking. If I had extra money lying around, I'd already be putting it into super. But hear me out. Voluntary contributions aren't just about putting in extra money. They're about putting in extra money in a tax-effective way that can significantly boost your final balance. There are two types of voluntary contributions, concessional contributions and non-concessional contributions. Let me explain both. Concessional contributions are contributions that go into your super before tax is deducted. Your employer's compulsory contributions are concessional, but you can also make additional concessional contributions yourself. This is often called salary sacrificing if it comes directly from your pay, or you can make personal deductible contributions from your own after-tax money and then claim a tax deduction for it. Either way, the result is the same. The money goes into your super and is taxed at 15% inside the super fund. Now, why does that matter? Because if you're earning a reasonable income, your marginal tax rate is probably higher than 15%. It might be 30% or 37% or 45%. So by putting money into super as a concessional contribution, you're saving the difference in tax, and that tax saving can be reinvested into your super. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're earning $70,000 a year. Your marginal tax rate, including the Medicare levy, is around 32%. If you earn an extra $1,000, you'll pay about $320 in tax and take home $680. But if you salary sacrifice that $1,000 into super instead, it only gets taxed at 15%. So you pay $150 in tax and $850 goes into your super. That's an extra $170 in your super compared to taking it as cash and then putting it in yourself. Multiply that by years and years, and you can see how it adds up. This is the power of concessional contributions. But there are limits. There's a cap on how much you can contribute as concessional contributions each year. Currently, that cap sits at around $27,500 per year. That includes your employer contributions. So if your employer is putting in, say, $10,000 a year, you can add another $17,500 yourself. Now that might sound like a lot of money, and for many people it is. But remember, we're talking about adding $100,000 to your super. If you can afford to make additional concessional contributions, even just a few $1,000s a year, it makes a significant difference over time, especially when you factor in investment returns and compound growth. Now let's talk about non-concessional contributions. These are after-tax contributions. You've already paid tax on this money. You put it into your super, and it doesn't get taxed again. So why would you do this? Because once the money is inside super, it grows in a low-tax environment. Earnings on super investments are taxed at a maximum of 15%. Outside of super, investment earnings are taxed at your marginal rate. So if you have savings sitting in a bank account or in shares outside of super, moving some of that money into super can result in much better long-term growth because of the tax advantage. Non-concessional contributions also have a cap. Currently, it's around $110,000 per year. But here's something interesting. If you're under 75, you can bring forward up to 3 years' worth of non-concessional contributions. That means you could contribute up to $330,000 in 1 year if you have the funds available. This is incredibly powerful if you've received an inheritance, or if you've downsized your home, or if you've sold a business. You can put a large lump sum into super and it will grow in a tax-effective environment for the rest of your life. But be careful. There are rules, there are caps, there are penalties if you exceed the caps. This is why you must speak with a financial advisor before making large contributions. You need to make sure you're doing it correctly. You need to make sure you're not going to trigger excess contribution tax, and you need to make sure it makes sense for your overall financial situation. Because once money goes into super, it's locked away until you reach your preservation age and meet a condition of release. Usually that means retirement. You can't just take it out whenever you want, so you need to make sure you have enough money outside of super to live on in the meantime. Now, let's talk about a strategy that many people have never heard of. It's called the carry-forward rule for concessional contributions. This is a relatively new rule, and it's incredibly valuable for people over 50. Here's how it works. Remember how I said there's a cap on concessional contributions each year? Well, if you didn't use your full cap in previous years, you might be able to carry forward that unused cap and use it now. Specifically, if your total super balance is below $500,000, you can carry forward any unused concessional contribution cap from the previous 5 years. Let me give you an example to make this clear. Let's say your super balance is $400,000. Over the last 5 years, your employer has been contributing to your super, but you haven't made any additional contributions yourself. That means you have unused cap space from those years. You could potentially make a much larger concessional contribution this year by using that unused space. Instead of being limited to the standard cap, you might be able to contribute $50,000 or $70,000 or even more, depending on how much unused cap you have. And remember, that contribution is taxed at 15% instead of your marginal rate. The tax savings alone can be enormous. This is one of the most powerful strategies for boosting your super quickly. But again, you need to check your individual situation. You need to know your super balance, you need to know your contribution history, and you need to calculate how much unused cap you have. A financial advisor can help you with this. Let's talk about the government co-contribution. This is a strategy for lower income earners, and it's basically free money from the government. Here's how it works. If your income is below a certain threshold and you make a non-concessional contribution to your super, the government will match it up to a maximum amount. The exact thresholds and amounts change each year, but the principle remains the same. If you're eligible, the government will put money into your super just for contributing yourself. Now, the income threshold for this is relatively low. If you're working full-time on an average wage, you probably won't be eligible. But if you're working part-time, or if you're semi-retired, or if your income has dropped for any reason, you might qualify. And if you do, you should absolutely take advantage of it. It's free money. It's a return on investment that you can't get anywhere else. There's also something called a spouse contribution. If your spouse or partner has a low income, you can contribute to their super on their behalf and potentially receive a tax offset. This is particularly useful if one partner has been the primary income earner and the other has stayed home to raise children or worked part-time. Often in these situations, one partner has a much larger super balance than the other. By making spouse contributions, you can help balance that out, and you can receive a tax benefit for doing so. Again, there are income thresholds and limits, but if your situation fits, it's well worth exploring. Now let's talk about the downsizer contribution. This is a relatively new strategy, and it's specifically designed for people over a certain age who are selling their family home. If you're 65 or older and you sell a home that you've owned for at least 10 years, you can contribute up to $300,000 per person or $600,000 per couple into your super from the sale proceeds. And here's the best part. This contribution doesn't count towards your normal non-concessional contribution cap. It's separate. It's in addition. So even if you've already maxed out your non-concessional contributions for the year, you can still make a downsizer contribution on top of that. This strategy is incredibly powerful for people who are downsizing from a large family home into something smaller. The proceeds from the sale can be split between buying a new property, having some cash for living expenses, and boosting super. And that boost to super can make an enormous difference to your retirement income. $300,000 per person growing inside super for 10 or 15 years can easily turn into $400,000, $500,000, or more, depending on investment returns. That's life-changing money for many retirees. But again, there are rules. The home must have been your main residence, you must have owned it for at least 10 years, you must make the contribution within 90 days of receiving the sale proceeds, and there are other technical requirements. So if you're considering downsizing, speak to a financial advisor well before you sell. Plan it properly. Make sure you understand all the rules and all the opportunities. Let me talk about another strategy that people often overlook. It's called a recontribution strategy, and it's a bit more complex, but it can be incredibly valuable. Here's the concept. Not all money in your super is treated the same for tax purposes. Some of it is taxable, and some of it is tax-free. Generally, money that went into your super as concessional contributions, where you got a tax benefit going in, is taxable when it comes out. Money that went in as non-concessional contributions, where you'd already paid tax on it, is tax-free when it comes out. Why does this matter? Because when you die, the tax treatment of your super depends on whether the money is taxable or tax-free. If your beneficiaries are not your spouse, they may have to pay tax on the taxable component of your super, but they don't pay tax on the tax-free component. So here's the strategy. If you've already reached your preservation age and you've retired, you can withdraw money from your super tax-free. You can then recontribute it as a non-concessional contribution. This converts taxable money into tax-free money. You haven't increased your super balance, but you've changed the tax components, and if you pass away, your beneficiaries will pay less tax. This strategy doesn't directly add $100,000 to your super, but it can save your beneficiaries tens of thousands of dollars in tax. It's a way of preserving your wealth for the next generation, and for many people, that's just as important as growing the balance. Now, let me talk about investment choice. This is something that many people never think about, but it can have an enormous impact on your super balance. Most super funds offer a range of investment options. You can choose conservative options, balanced options, growth options, or even specific asset classes like shares or property. The investment option you choose determines how your super is invested, and therefore how much it grows over time. Many people just stick with the default option, which is usually a balanced fund, and that's fine. Balanced funds are designed to suit the average person, but they might not be optimal for you. If you're younger, or if you have a higher tolerance for risk, or if you won't need to access your super for many years, a growth option might be more appropriate. Growth options invest more heavily in shares and property, which tend to deliver higher returns over the long term, but with more volatility in the short term. On the other hand, if you're close to retirement, or if you have a low tolerance for risk, or if you need to access your super soon, a conservative option might be better. Conservative options invest more in cash and fixed interest, which are more stable but deliver lower returns. The point is this. The right investment choice for you depends on your individual circumstances, And over a period of 10 or 20 years, the difference between a conservative option and a growth option can be enormous. It can easily be the difference between having $50,000 more or $50,000 less in your super. So it's worth reviewing your investment choice. It's worth thinking about whether the default option is really the best option for you. And if you're not sure, speak to a financial advisor. This is one of the simplest ways to potentially boost your super without contributing any extra money. You're just making your existing money work harder. Let's talk about fees. Superannuation funds charge fees for managing your money: administration fees, investment fees, advice fees, insurance fees. These fees might seem small, especially as a percentage, but over time they add up a lot. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have $200,000 in super. One fund charges 1% in total fees per year. Another fund charges 1.5%. That's a difference of 0.5%, or $1,000 per year. It doesn't sound like much, does it? But over 20 years, with compound growth, that difference could be $30,000 or $40,000 just from fees. That's money that should be in your pocket, but instead it's going to the fund. So it's worth reviewing your fees. It's worth comparing your fund to other funds. It's worth asking, am I getting value for what I'm paying? Now, I'm not saying you should always choose the cheapest fund. Sometimes higher fees are justified if the fund delivers better returns or better services, but often they're not. Often you're paying more for no good reason. So check your fees, check your fund's performance, and if you're being charged too much, consider switching to a lower-cost option. This is another way to boost your super without contributing extra money. You're just keeping more of what's already yours. Now, let's talk about insurance inside super. Most super funds automatically provide insurance cover: life insurance, total and permanent disability insurance, and sometimes income protection insurance. And that insurance is paid for out of your super balance. The premiums are deducted every year. For many people, having insurance inside super makes sense. It provides important protection, and the cost is manageable. But for some people, it doesn't make sense. Maybe you already have insurance outside of super. Maybe you don't need as much cover as the default amount. Maybe the premiums are too high and they're eroding your super balance. Here's the thing. If you're in your 50s or 60s, and if your kids are grown up, and if you don't have big debts, you might not need life insurance anymore. If you do have a permanent disability, you probably can't work anyway, so disability insurance might not be necessary. Every dollar you're paying in insurance premiums is a dollar that's not growing in your super. Over 10 years, those premiums can add up to tens of thousands of dollars. So it's worth reviewing your insurance. Do you need it? Do you need as much as you have? Could you reduce the cover and reduce the premiums? Could you cancel it altogether? Again, this is a decision you should make with professional advice. Insurance is important if you need it. But if you don't need it, you're just giving money away. Let me tell you about Bruce and Jenny. They're a couple I've worked with. Well, not really, they're fictional, but they represent a situation I've seen many times. Bruce is 60, Jenny is 58. They both work full-time. Bruce earns about $80,000 a year. Jenny earns about $60,000. Bruce has $300,000 in super. Jenny has $180,000. They're worried. They know those balances aren't enough to retire comfortably. They've done the calculations. If they retire at 67, and if their super grows at an average rate, they'll run out of money in their mid-80s, maybe earlier if something unexpected happens. They can't afford to work longer. Bruce's back is bad. Jenny is exhausted. They need a strategy. So here's what they did. First, they both started salary sacrificing additional amounts into their super. Bruce salary sacrificed $5,000 a year. Jenny sacrificed $3,000. That's extra money going into super before tax, so they saved on tax and boosted their super at the same time. Over 7 years until they retire, that's an extra $56,000 in super, plus investment returns. Second, they reviewed their super funds. They discovered Bruce was paying high fees in an old retail fund. They switched him to a low-cost industry fund. That saved about $1,000 a year in fees. Over 7 years, that's another $7,000 plus the growth on that money. Third, they reduced their insurance inside super. Their kids were adults. Their mortgage was almost paid off. They didn't need $200,000 of life insurance anymore. They reduced it to $50,000 each, just enough to cover funeral costs. That saved about $1,500 a year in premiums. Over 7 years, that's another $10,000 saved. Fourth, Jenny received a small inheritance from her aunt, $30,000. Instead of spending it, she put it into super as a non-concessional contribution. That $30,000, growing over 7 years, could turn into $40,000 or $45,000, depending on returns. Fifth, they both reviewed their investment options. They realized they were in balanced funds, which was fine, but they had 7 years until retirement, so they switched to growth options. They could handle a bit more volatility for the chance of higher returns. Over 7 years, that higher return could add an extra $20,000 or $30,000 to their combined balance. Add it all up, the extra salary sacrifice, the fee savings, the insurance savings, the inheritance contribution, the better investment returns. By the time Bruce and Jenny retire, they could have an extra $80,000 to $100,000 in super compared to if they'd done nothing. And they didn't work an extra hour. They just made smarter decisions. Now, I'm not saying everyone can do exactly what Bruce and Jenny did. Maybe you can't afford to salary sacrifice. Maybe you don't have an inheritance. Maybe you're already in a low-cost fund. That's fine. The point is to look at all of the strategies and figure out which ones suit your situation. Even if you can only implement 1 or 2, it will make a difference. Every little bit helps, and over time, those little bits compound into something significant. Let's talk about some of the risks and downsides, because nothing is perfect. Every strategy has pros and cons. First, when you put money into super, it's locked away. You can't access it until you reach your preservation age and retire. So you need to make sure you have enough money outside of super to live on until then. Don't put so much into super that you're struggling to pay bills today. Balance is important. Second, the rules around super change. Governments love to tinker with superannuation. Contribution caps change, tax rates change, access rules change. A strategy that makes sense today might not make sense in 5 years. That's frustrating, but that's the reality. You need to stay informed, you need to review your situation regularly, you need to adapt. Third, investment returns are not guaranteed. Yes, super funds have delivered solid returns over the long term, but there will be years when returns are negative. There will be years when your balance goes down, not up. You need to be prepared for that volatility, especially if you're in a growth option. If you can't stomach seeing your balance drop, you need a more conservative investment strategy. Fourth, there's the risk of making mistakes, contributing too much and triggering excess contribution tax, withdrawing money incorrectly, choosing the wrong investment option. These mistakes can be costly. This is why professional advice is so important. A good financial advisor can help you navigate the complexity and avoid the pitfalls. Now, let me give you a step-by-step action plan. These are the things you can do right now, today, to start boosting your super. Step 1. Find your super statements, all of them. Find out your current balance, find out what fund you're in, find out what fees you're paying, find out what investment option you're in, find out what insurance you have. You need to know where you stand before you can make any decisions. Step 2. Check if you have any lost or unclaimed super. Many Australians have multiple super accounts from old jobs that they've forgotten about. You can search for lost super on the ATO website. If you find any, consolidate it into your current fund. That reduces fees and makes your super easier to manage. Step 3. Review your fees and your fund's performance. Compare your fund to other funds. There are comparison websites that make this easy. If you're paying high fees or if your fund is underperforming, consider switching. But make sure you understand any exit fees or loss of benefits before you switch. Step 4. Review your investment option. Think about your time horizon. Think about your risk tolerance. Think about your goals. Is your current investment option the right one for you? If not, consider changing it. Most funds let you switch online. It's simple. Step 5. Review your insurance. Do you need the cover you have? Is it too much? Too little? Is it value for money? If you're not sure, speak to an insurance specialist or a financial advisor. Step 6. Calculate how much you could afford to contribute to Super. Can you salary sacrifice from your pay? Can you make a personal contribution from your savings? Even small amounts make a difference. If you can afford it, consider starting with just $1,000 or $2,000 a year. See how it feels. See if you can manage it. You can always increase it later. Step 7. Check if you're eligible for any government incentives, the co-contribution, the low-income super tax offset, the spouse contribution tax offset. If you qualify, make sure you're taking advantage. Step 8. If you're over 60 and you own your home, think about whether you might downsize in the future. If so, start planning for the downsizer contribution now. Understand the rules, understand the opportunities. Talk to your family about it. Step 9. Speak to a financial advisor. I know I've said this multiple times, but it's crucial. A good advisor can look at your specific situation and recommend strategies that suit you. Yes, it costs money, but the value you get in return in terms of better outcomes and peace of mind is worth far more. If you can't afford a full financial plan, many advisors offer single-issue consultations. You pay for an hour or two of their time to discuss super contributions. That might be all you need. Step 10. Make a commitment. Decide which strategy or strategies you're going to implement. Write it down. Put a date on it. Tell your partner or a friend. Make yourself accountable. Don't just think about it, do it. Let me talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough, the emotional side of superannuation. For many people, looking at their super balance is stressful. It brings up feelings of regret. I should have started earlier. I should have contributed more. I should have paid more attention. Those feelings are normal, but they're not helpful. You can't change the past. You can only change the future. And the fact that you're here, listening to this, means you're taking steps to change your future. That's something to be proud of. That's something to celebrate. You're not burying your head in the sand. You're facing the problem head on. That takes courage. I also want to talk about the bigger picture. Superannuation is important. Having enough money to retire comfortably is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. Your health matters. Your relationships matter. Your sense of purpose matters. Your happiness matters. Don't sacrifice all of those things just to boost your super balance. Don't work yourself into the ground. Don't deny yourself every pleasure. Find balance. Yes, be smart about money. Yes, make good decisions, but also live your life. Enjoy today while planning for tomorrow. Because what's the point of having $1 million in super if you're too sick or too tired or too miserable to enjoy it? This is the third act of your life. The first act was growing up and learning. The second act was working and raising a family. And now, the third act. This is when you get to reap the rewards of all that hard work. This is when you get to choose how you spend your time. This is when you get to focus on what really matters to you. Yes, you need money to do that, but money is just a tool. It's not the goal. The goal is a life well lived, a life full of meaning and connection and joy. Superannuation is just one part of that picture. Adding $100,000 to your super is achievable. For some of you, it will be easy. For others, it will require sacrifice and discipline, but it's worth it. That extra money could be the difference between retiring at 65 or working until 70. It could be the difference between living comfortably or living frugally. It could be the difference between leaving an inheritance to your kids or leaving them nothing. It could be the difference between feeling secure or feeling worried. That's what this is really about. Security, freedom, dignity, the ability to make choices rather than having choices forced upon you. I want to leave you with this thought. You are not powerless. Yes, the system is complex. Yes, the rules are confusing. Yes, you've made mistakes in the past. We all have. But you have agency. You have control. You have options. The strategies I've shared with you today are real. They're legal. They're available to you. Will they solve every problem? No. Will they guarantee you a perfect retirement? No. But they will improve your situation. They will give you more options. They will give you a better chance of the retirement you deserve. So take action. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Don't assume it's too late. It's not too late. Even if you're 60 or 65, even if you only have a few years left before retirement, these strategies can still make a significant difference. Every dollar you add to your super today is a dollar that will support you tomorrow. Every decision you make to reduce fees or optimize your investment is a decision that will benefit you for years to come. You've worked hard your whole life. You've earned the right to retire comfortably. Now it's time to make sure that happens. Before I finish, let me remind you one final time. Everything I've shared today is general information only. It is not personal financial advice. Your circumstances are unique. Your super is unique. Your goals are unique. Before you make any decisions, please speak with a licensed financial advisor. Please speak with your accountant. Please speak with your super fund. Get proper advice, make informed decisions. Be smart, be careful, but also be proactive, because the worst thing you can do is nothing. Thank you for listening. I wish you all the very best. You've got this. Take care.